the Q&A. If you have like a question that pops up while I'm going, feel free to throw it on there. More than likely, what I'm going to do is circle back around towards the end. So for all of you guys that are sticking around to the end, again, I would try to stick around everything as long as possible, just because the information in the beginning is just as good as the information at the end. But I'm also going to be telling you guys how to get my ebook, my rental property calculator, and a couple other things at the end. So for you guys that are watching live, we're going to have also a special Q&A session at the end where I can answer any questions that you guys have about what we go over tonight, or really anything in general. So I want you guys to pick out, maybe one of these questions. First of all, I want you guys to maybe just ask, and you guys can just kind of quick fire in the chat. At what age do you feel like retirement is supposed to be? Not like what you think, but like kind of what you've been told, or what you grew up around thinking, or like kind of what you heard maybe from your parents or your environment. At what age do you feel like, or have you been told, I guess, growing up that retirement is, quote unquote, supposed to be at? So go ahead and throw that in the chat. And I'm gonna ask you guys a couple questions just so we can kind of get started on the right path. I want to see where you guys are at, mentally, and just kind of, where you're at and all this stuff. So just throw a number in there real quick, hit enter. At what age have you kind of been told, maybe that retirement is supposed to happen? Chelsea said early 50s, or say late 50s, early 60s. Ellen 70. Joe, I don't know if it's a joke or not, but it's honestly kind of real, because, as sad as that is, I mean, Joe said death. So, I mean, hopefully, hopefully there's retirement at some time, but it's reality, right? I'm not like, if you guys follow me, then I'm not just like this ho-hum, like, rainbows and unicorns. Like, that's cool. Like, I believe in positivity, but at the same time, there's a mix between positivity and reality. And the reality right now, we'll go over some of the stats here in a second, but, I think it's 60% of millennials can't come up with $1,000 for an emergency. And I think a similar number has zero save for retirement. And when you see millennial, depending on how old you are, you might be like, well, millennials are in their teens and 20s. Millennials are a set generation, right? So like they get older, right? It's not just like everybody in their teenagers is a millennial forever. So millennials right now are anywhere from like 25 to like 42, right? And so 60% of those people in their 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s have zero save for retirement, right? So that's kind of the reality where we're at. And those people will probably not retire unless they really get going, right? So what is your biggest hurdle, I guess, would you say, when it comes to retiring early? And that could be the lack of, maybe an education around what you need to do, or maybe you got off to a late start, or you don't maybe make enough money, or maybe it's debt, or maybe, you don't necessarily know how to invest correctly, or, what are kind of, I guess, where you guys at as far as what are some of your current issues or your biggest hurdle when it comes to these types of things? And some of those things down there might be some good ideas to think about when it comes to credit cards, savings, stocks, real estate, business, student loans, budgeting, income, debt, credit, right? Those are all kind of things that, maybe either you want to learn more about, or or maybe your current issues, right? And those kind of are the same thing, right? Most of the things that we have issues with are also the things that we want to fix or learn more about. So what are you guys, what's your biggest hurdle that you maybe have right now when it comes to things like, all those topics there, or retiring early, or maybe cutting, 5 years or 10 years off your retirement? Or you might say, I don't know what my issues are, right? I don't know what I don't know, kind of thing. So throw that in the chat. Let me know. It doesn't have to be long, but I would just kind of love to hear your thoughts on kind of where you guys are at, what issues you guys might have. And so the more that you guys throw in there, the more it helps me, kind of tailor things tonight to what is going to be, in all of your benefits. And I'll be able to kind of talk directly, almost in a way, to each one of you to make sure that we are, hitting the points that we need to in regards to what your current issues are. So yeah, Joe said student loan debt, dead end job with no advancement, no capital, fear, no discipline. Joe, I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, I think a lot of people in here, whether they type it or not, probably have some or all of those things as well. And those are all real, parts of the game, right? We all have fear. We all have, issues when it comes to discipline, even myself, right? And I've got a lot of tips and tricks of how I kind of bake discipline into what I do, even though it's maybe not natural. I think a lot of people think motivation and discipline is just something that like you're born with or you're not. And that's really not the case. There are things that you can kind of do to fix that. But I think a lot of it comes down to, you're talking about debt and a dead end job and no capital, fear, no discipline. I think, in my opinion, which is why I do what I do, that education about whatever, right? Investing or debt or, career advancement or picking the right career. When you're educated about those things and you understand them fully, it takes away a lot of the fear and it takes away a lot of the discipline that you need. Why? Because when you know something, right? Like some people might be scared of driving, right? But once you understand how to drive, you understand that, wrecks are things that happen, but, as long as you know how to drive and you're, good on the roads and you pay attention and you wear a seatbelt and you're not texting and driving, all of a sudden driving is a lot less scary, right? Because you know what you're doing. But if you don't know how to drive and you get in a car, you'd probably be terrified, right? Or somewhere in between, right? So same thing with money, and discipline, right? If you're more educated, you understand what, who, how, and all these things and why, right? Then you can kind of create a plan of staying disciplined. Because a lot of times, an example, like if you're exercising, right? And you're like, well, I don't really know about exercising, so I'm just going to kind of do these random, like if I want to like maybe get a better arms or whatever the case is, or bench press, and you're like, well, I don't really know like the best ways or best reps or how many sets or how long to work out or what music to listen to or all these different things, right? If you don't know how to do it, then it's going to be harder to be disciplined, because you might go work out, you might not see results, and then you're like, well, why am I doing this? And then you're not going to be disciplined because you didn't maybe know how to do it correctly from the beginning, right? So I think all you guys are obviously here tonight to learn a lot of these things, and so I hope it will be kind of a good start for you guys. So let's start getting around. So you guys said don't know about grow wealth other than working more, right? Want to invest, cool. We're going to be going over all that as well, as far as what numbers to track, all that kind of stuff. Real estate, starting an LLC, super easy. What types of properties to buy. So we'll talk about kind of all that stuff tonight. And if something doesn't get answered, then of course we'll dive into that, in the Q&A session at the end. So before we get started, I want to, break down some potential false beliefs that you may have, that I see a lot of people have that I work with. Off the jump, we already talked about this, but, financial freedom, people say it takes 30 to 40 years of working to reach. And the truth is many people reach in 5 to 10 years or less. And even if you don't reach it in 5 to 10 years or less, right? And this is another thing. People are like, oh, well, it's either 5 years or it's nothing. But it's like, well, if you're planning on retiring at 65 or 70 or never right now, then isn't it cooler to retire even at 60 or 55 or 50 or 45, right? And then working our way down of maybe how do we get there quicker, right? So my belief is genuinely, right? Every single person, or we'll say 99% of people, right? As long as they want it, right? And they're physically capable of doing it, everyone can reach retirement or financial freedom, financial independence much, much sooner than, the typical 40 to 45 years. People say you need to be a multimillionaire to retire. The people think like, oh, you need to build a company and sell it for $5-10 million to be able to retire, become financially independent. We're going to go over tonight why that's not necessarily true. Of course, that's a way to do it. But there's a lot of, different reasons as to how much money do you need? What does financial freedom look like to you? And how much money, as a result, how much money do you need to do what you're doing, right? And this is the last one. I think I heard some of this in some of you guys where you said, financial freedom is right for me. There's too much work involved. I don't have enough time. It's too hard. It's too complicated, which maybe you're thinking this consciously or subconsciously or, something along those lines. And I just want to tell you guys, like, it simply comes down to, like I said, learning the system as far as figuring out where you want to go, right? And building a system to kind of get you there. And then putting in the action consistently over the long haul. And of course, there's things like, luck or good luck, bad luck, destiny, whatever you want to call it. But we don't control those things. But I truly believe that if you learn, a system or the system to kind of get you to where you're trying to go, and you consistently put an effort over time, you will get to where you're trying to get to, based on those other things you can't control. Maybe it will be 6 years, maybe it will be 10 years, maybe it will be 15 or 20 years, right? But it just comes down to figuring out what are those inputs that are going to get you the outputs that you're looking for so that you can get to where you're going as soon as possible. So I want to put you guys in a good mental state before we talk about, further into what we're going into. But what if you, and these are rhetorical, but so I want you guys to just kind of imagine in your head, What if you can make a few changes to your current day-to-day life and as a result, retire early with millions of dollars? What would it be like if you were able to make more money and invest in assets that paid all or most of your bills for you? And what would it be like if you were able to quit your job and work on what you want, where you want, when you want, with who you want? Right. So those are all, like awesome things to kind of think about. And they're all true, right? They all have you have the potential possibility to make all three of those things happen if those are something that you want. So what I'll say is it's very possible. And I'll talk about my story here in 1 second, but I want to give you guys somebody that you don't know. It's somebody that just follows me. His name's Corey. I met him 6 months ago. And before, he was making decent money as a nurse. Right. He owned no real estate. His rent was $1,500. And there's a reason why I'm giving you those specific numbers. And as you can see, I worked with him. We worked on a couple of different things as far as, hey, how do we potentially decrease your, expenses while not maybe taking away from your lifestyle as much? How do we increase your income? And then how do we make, what are some strategies that we can do to maybe get you started in real estate and in the stock market and kind of get some money working for you? So with Corey, and this isn't necessarily everybody's situation, but again, it's a real life example. So I think it's really good just to kind of paint the picture and give you an idea of one way, right? So for him, he's somebody that he's younger, he's single. And so for him, travel nursing, which is basically you going out on the road and instead of working at one hospital, you're kind of bouncing around maybe every, 3-4 months. And so for some people, it's actually a win-win-win, right? You get to travel, you make more money, right? They pay extra money for, per diems and food and your housing and stuff like that too, right? So it can be a win-win-win for the right person. So for him, that worked, right? So now he's making more money. He also bought a house. And so what he did was something called house hacking, which we can kind of go over in a little bit, but essentially he bought a 4-unit property. One unit is the unit he lives in. The other 3 units, he rents them out to basically people that he knows in the area, like friends. And so those 3 people, what they pay for rent, it's fair market rent. So they get somewhere to live at a fair price, but all that money is going to pay down the mortgage. So essentially his rent is zero. So just from those couple of things, alone, he's been able to, now he makes $85,000. So he's making $25,000 a year more. He's also spending he's spending $25,000 less per year because now he doesn't have rent and he was able to kind of move around a couple other things in his budget. And so just from those few things alone, he was able to go from investing $5,000 a year to now investing $48,000 a year, which is an insane amount of money, right? That's $4,000 a month. But as you can see, this isn't like that unreasonable. Is this going to be your exact path? No, like everybody's path is different. Yours might be better, right? Yours might be slightly just different, right? But for him, he's making $85,000 a year after taxes, and he's investing, almost half of it, right? And he's still living a good life. He owns his home, but he doesn't have to pay rent, right? So there's just a lot of options when it comes to it. And so I want you to look at this as just one option, right? So he's saving money on rent. He's also been able to buy already his second rental property. That rental property is making him another $500-600 a month outside of his job. And so his plan is to kind of continue to buy rental properties. But as you can see, the difference between investing $5,000 a year, and we'll say we put that in something like the stock market at 8-9% per year on average over the course of the long haul, right? $5,000 a year would get you $274,000 over the course of 20 years. And we'll talk about how I got that number here in a second. But that's not bad, right? That's a pretty good start, but that's definitely not going to be able to get you to like retire. That kind of would just be a slightly okay start, in my opinion, like as far as normal retirement. And you probably still would even be maybe a little bit behind at that point. But now for making those changes, right? He keeps this up. He continues to buy more rental properties. He's probably going to continue to make more money as time goes on, right? If he invests $48,000 per year, he's now looking at $3 million in just 20 years. So I think Corey's 26, 27 years old, if I remember correctly. So like his worst case scenario, in my opinion, is probably retiring when he's like 45 years old, like worst case scenario. And so as he gets better, makes more money, invests more, maybe buys more rental properties, right? I think that number is only going to go down and down. And so he's somebody that didn't know really like any of this stuff before. And so just by making a few changes, he was able to really kind of figure out a way to, really make a major mathematical quantitative difference. Not just like, oh, I learned this stuff, but I'm not doing anything with it. Like he's, as you can see, I mean, he's already making moves. This is, you know, what he had sent me. Like this is the first deal. I think he said, yeah, closing on Friday. Thank you for your guidance. Help me take the plunge. And then this was him. He's like, hey, he just replied back to a story, like so casual, like, hey, I just bought my second rental property. And so it's just cool to see. And this is somebody else that I kind of work with, but just by learning and educating yourself on kind of how to get there, you can, you know, really make some big differences. So in the next 45 minutes or so, like I said, we're going to go over the 3 main ways to reach financial freedom in the quickest amount of time possible. And then I'm going to talk about what is the best way for you based off of, you know, who you are, where you're trying to get to. So who am I real quick? I know a lot of you guys follow me, but just to kind of get you, you know, again, I want this to be a kind of experience where you guys get to know me a little bit better. I'm not just like this little, you know, guy in the corner with a suit on. I'm just a guy, right? I feel very, very blessed and to even be here, right? And you know, obviously I put in a lot of hard work, and maybe there was, you know, like I said, this destiny or luck factor along the way, but you know, at the end of the day, I'm just a person, right? And so I want this to be an experience where you guys get to kind of know me, you know, so at the end of this, regardless, we leave, you go, hey, I got a lot out of this. And, you know, I met him and now I feel closer as kind of a part of this community of people that want to take a similar path. So I became a financially free millionaire at 27 years old. We'll kind of talk about, I guess, what I mean by that. I was a millionaire before I got on social media. Yeah, I know there's a lot of people that kind of teach you about money, but it's about, they're teaching money to people about like they made their money from teaching people about making money. And so like, it's this like endless loop. For me, I'm somebody that everything I've done, I mean, I've got a long track record. I mean, I've got 3 years of me posting about it. So if you follow me, you probably know, but I've done all these things, right? And I tell people about stocks, I tell people about real estate, and I tell people about starting a business, because depending on who you are, right, 1, 2, or 3 of those options might be best for you. So I retired from my job forever. I've been, my 1 year anniversary of, I guess, walking away from, you know, corporate America was, I think yesterday. I'm a real estate investor, 10 plus sources of income between rental property, stocks, dividends, you know, different things with the social media and all that kind of stuff. Over $750,000 invested in the stock market. And then also you guys obviously know me as the CEO or founder, owner of Defining Wealth, which it's kind of crazy, but I guess it's been 2.5 years now or so. And I mean, I say we, it's really mostly me, but I got a couple of, you know, team members now, but we built it from something I just was started doing for fun to where now there's 200,000 plus followers across Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and all these different places. So it's definitely cool to, you know, to be a part of that and help people change their lives. So for me, you know, a lot of people, you know, think like growing up, like my parents must have talked about money and investing and real estate. I grew up in a small town with a loving family, which I consider to be an incredible blessing. But, you know, my parents never really told me about money. They said just, you know, hey, here's a piggy bank, that kind of stuff, but nothing crazy, right? So I didn't grow up with this pedigree or, you know, investing information, right? Which a lot of people, I think when people hear stories, and this is okay, right? It just is what it is. A lot of people look at maybe somebody that's done something and then they immediately try to discredit it, or they try to say, oh, well, he or she must have had X, Y, Z, right? And it's kind of a justification as to why we don't have it, right? And I do this, I do this too, and I have to like kind of check myself, where it's somebody that's like in incredible shape, and I'm like, well, that guy must, you know, take steroids, or that guy must, you know, have been born with that body or whatever. And I have to be like, well, you know, maybe first of all, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, who knows? But if they didn't, right, it's kind of just a way for me to justify it. So I like to kind of talk about these things because some people, you know, they may be like, oh, well, I bet his parents set him up with everything and his dad got him a job at his dad's company and all this stuff, right? And I think that once you realize that that's not what happened, you know, I think it kind of opens you up to kind of saying, okay, like this is possible, right? Because the more reasons you line up as to why you can't do something, the more your brain's going to start to believe it. So I got good grades. You know, I went to in-state school. I graduated college debt-free due to scholarships. I'm working multiple jobs. The first thing I did was I started off keeping my expenses super low. And what that allowed me to do was take a job where it was a little bit more of a risk, you could call it. It was a mostly commission-based sales job. And I was making $30,000 a year, which is, you know, this was in 2015, which even in 2015 was absolutely no money. It's even less money now, obviously. But because I kept my expenses so low and I was driving an old car and, just, not spending money, not like going and getting, crazy expensive apartment, all this kind of stuff. I was able to say, hey, I'm going to give this a year and see if I can make it work. Right. But when I started working, I liked the people, the job was okay, but I think I just realized like, hey, I'm waking up at 6 a.m. I'm trying to like, maybe work out or read or like do something for my mental and physical health. I'm going to work early. I'm working from 8 to 6. I'm leaving. I'm getting home at maybe 7. I'm eating dinner. I'm taking a shower, talking to my wife for 30 minutes, maybe watching one Netflix episode. And then I'm like, this is it, And so for me, I was like, this isn't me, right? This isn't going to be my life. And I don't know how the hell I'm going to get out of this, but I'm going to figure it out. Right. And so that's kind of what led me on the journey. As I told you guys, I kept my expenses low. For me, that sales job, because I kept my expenses low, I was able to take, more risk in that. And so in the first year, I think I ended up making maybe 60, and then over 100, then over 150, then over 200, then over 250, then over 300 by the time that I left. Right. So, and obviously I still kept my expenses pretty low over the course of time. And I started investing in the stock market immediately. Eventually I got into real estate, and bought a primary home, bought rental properties, bought 7-8 units of, doors, you could call it, of real estate. And then eventually, as you guys know, like a year or two ago, I started defining wealth, which wasn't even making money from it for the longest time. But I got to a point where I realized that, I was I was pretty much almost at financial freedom as it was, right? I mean, I had millions, or, I guess, probably millions of dollars in assets. I had probably a $1.4 million net worth. And so I was at a point where I was bringing in a bunch of money from real estate, my stocks were growing, and I was at a point where I could probably retire forever within, a few months or maybe a year anyways, just depending on how some things went. But I kind of got to the point where I'm like, well, what do I want to do anyways? Right. And so that kind of became, well, I want to teach, coach, lead, help other people do the same thing, right? Whether that's stocks, real estate, or business. And so that's when I kind of was like, well, let me just leave and focus on building this business while I do all these other things at the same time. And, now that's, again, left me at a point where, obviously this is a fast forward, but 750 in stocks, $1.5 million net worth, 8 doors, 8,000 a month, retire from corporate America. And I've got a successful multi-6-figure online business doing what I love. Right. And so I don't want to talk. I hate even talking about me. And then that's why you notice, like me, I start talking faster. But again, I don't talk about to brag, right? I just talk about it because it happened. It's real. And I think that, the biggest thing we talked about earlier, a lot of you guys were saying, well, education and, I don't understand. Even Simon kind of said, figure out what you want. Right. And so I think the biggest thing that stops people at the very beginning is like, they don't have a concept of like, what even is this? What could it look like? What paths are there? And when you start to see people, maybe it's like me, or, I bring on other people like me in my master classes, things like that, to come on that have maybe done it through Airbnb, or done it through a business, or done it through whatever, right? Stocks, or, whatever the case may be. And the reason why I do that is because I think that once you start to see what the path looks like, it's much easier to walk, right? Like, because if you have a blindfold on, right, you're like, well, I'm not going down this path, right? But you take the blindfold off and you see somebody. I'll give you a good example. This is a quick one. I don't know what the year, right? And one of you guys probably know the story, so don't kill me if I get some of the numbers wrong. But the 4-minute mile, I think it was in the 1900s, I think mid 1900s. Nobody had ever run a 4-minute mile. A guy named Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. He ran like 3:59, 3:58, whatever the case was, right? But no one had broken it for like hundreds of years, right? Like no one had ran a 4-minute mile. And within like a month of Roger Bannister breaking that 4-minute mile, like 15 or 20 other people broke the 4-minute mile, right? And you got to ask yourself, like, why in the world were they all at that time? And you know what it was? People understood that it was possible. I think people genuinely, prior to him doing that, didn't understand it was possible. So there's a lot to say about you seeing exactly how somebody's done something, because maybe it's not your exact path, but it's possible, right? And once you know it's possible, then you're going to dive in, right? Because if I tell you like, hey man, jump, I want you to go jump 20 feet from this building to this building. You're like, absolutely no way, right? Like that's not possible, right? But if for some reason you were able to see someone do it, right, and you realize there's a trampoline or there was whatever, right? That's probably a terrible example, but you guys get that when you see that it's possible, right, it completely changes your mindset and you're more willing to dive into figuring out how to do it than than maybe before. So let's talk about the flow of money, right? So this is kind of the system, right? You have income. And most people live over here, right? All their money goes to expenses. That's living paycheck to paycheck or debt, right? And they're continuing to maybe even rack up debt if they're living what I call worse than paycheck to paycheck, right? Where they're actually taking out credit cards and stuff to kind of fund their lifestyle, which is obviously a worst case scenario. So the whole game is, how do we increase this, potentially decrease this, depending on what your budget or spending plan currently looks like, but really focus on increasing this, get rid of most of this, depending on the interest rate and a couple other things. And the real goal is, how much money can we get here for protection, just to start off, things like emergency fund and whatnot. But really, how much money can we get it, off the wealth limiting side and to the wealth building side, right? Because when every dollar that comes in goes out, what's your best case scenario? Your best case scenario is a $0 net worth, right? Or worse, right? But in this situation, when you put money into savings, you put money really into investments, you give yourself the ability to grow that money, right? So what is financial independence? Well, it's this idea that, again, all the money that comes in from income, of course, it goes to expenses and debt and savings, but the money that goes into investing, right, is usually going to go one of three places. And there's a lot of different ways within each one of these, but these are the three main general categories: is either the stock market, business, or real estate, right? And so with the stock market, you make money usually in one of two ways. First is appreciation, which is the amount of your stock growing over the course of time, or dividends, which are portions of companies' profits that are kicked back to shareholders. You could start a business, right? And then you take the revenue, right? And maybe that revenue is enough to quit your day job, or and regardless, even if it is, you eventually have to retire. So, that revenue goes usually into the stock market or real estate that is typically more passive. And then there's also real estate as well, right? Where you make money in two main ways, but actually more ways than this. One is appreciation, growing in value. Two is monthly cash flow, which is all your income from the property minus all your expenses. And then you're able to live off that cash flow, right? So those are the three main ways, and that's what we're going to go into tonight. So the first way is through the stock market, right? So I want you guys to type in there into the chat: retirement is not an age, retirement is a blank. So I want you guys to type in that word. And what I'm going to do is fix this, because that's not right. And why is it an age? Why does that sound? I know it's right, but an age. It just sounds right. That sounds not right. So retirement is a blank. Retirement is a blank. I want you guys to throw that in the chat real quick, and then I will get going, right? So I usually get a lot of different answers on this, so I'm curious to see what you guys say. Just a one-word answer, throw it in there. There's no wrong answer. Usually everybody sends a lot of right answers, but there's one that I'm typically looking for. So we got lifestyle, we got mindset, we got number, we got state of living, we got lifestyle, we got state of mind, we got number, right? So the answer I'm looking for, they're actually all right, because it is a lifestyle, right? State of mind is also correct. State of living, lifestyle, mindset, those things are all correct. It's all part of it. But for this specific example, you might have cheated and looked at the next line, but it is a number, right? Especially when it comes to the stock market. And so let's figure out what that number is, right? So your typical financial independence number, right? Then this kind of gives us a good thing to base off how much money do we maybe need to retire. And so there was a thing called the Trinity study, and the Trinity study came up with the 4% rule, right? So what they basically did in this study was they said, hey, what percentage of a portfolio, right? Like if you have, $1 million, right, in a portfolio, how much of that, what percent can you take out per year and not run out of money over the course of, 30 years, right? Because that's the typical retirement. And so what they came up with was they ran studies on, well, are you taking it out in 1970 or 71 or 72 or 85 or 88, right? Because it all depends, like, are you going to take it out and then the next year the market crashes? Are you going to take it out, and the next year the market takes off? So they basically took into account all the different possible options, and they tried to come up with a safe number that said, hey, this is a safe withdrawal rate in 99% of the simulations that we ran. And the number they came up with is 4%. And probably a better number might be closer to 3.5 now, just because of inflation and things like that. But 3.5 to 4% is a typical safe withdrawal rate. So what does that mean? When we're coming up with our financial independence number, right? First of all, we take our annual expenses, right? So if your annual expenses are $50,000 a year, your stock portfolio that you would need, you do annual expenses times 25. Why times 25? Because it's $50,000 divided by 4%, divided by 0.04. When you divide by 0.04, the way math works, it's the same as multiplying by 25. So that number gives you $1.25 million, which that means you would need $1.25 million in order to be able to retire, right? And so that would mean you would be able to take out $50,000 per year plus inflation each year and not run out of money over the course of 30 years. And so you might be like, well, why, if it's basically your yearly expenses times 25, don't you just have 25 years of expenses? Not necessarily, because the money is not just sitting in a savings account. The money is also growing over the course of time while you're spending it down, right? So it's a little bit different. But that's how you find out your number through the 4% rule. And so let's just look at an example just to give you an idea, right? So let's put it out over 40 years. We'll say about 9% per year on average over the course of time. Now, this is obviously the number that you have control over. So whether it's 100 or 1,000 or 2,000, that's really what's going to make the difference, right? So let's say that we are trying to get to $1.25 million. Let's say we invested $700 per month into, mostly index funds. So over 40 years, we would have $2.8 million, right? So at what point would we get to 1.25? So we can come down here and say, okay, we'd get there in 31 years, which is actually pretty cool because typical retirement, especially if you're starting at zero, would probably take you 45 years. That's the age from 20 to 65. But as you can see, just from investing $700 and basically just automating that, going to your work, you don't have to start a company. You don't have to invest in real estate if you don't want to. Just from doing that alone, simply, you've shaved, 14 years off that 45-year retirement, now down to 30 years. So what if you're like, all right, well, what if for whatever reason I was able to invest $1,500 a month, right? And so you can see, well, now in 40 years, you end up at 6 million. So when do we hit our goal now? Now you can see, well, we hit our goal in 23 years. So we've shaved off another 8 years. So we basically cut our retirement in half, right? And so regardless of whether you have $1,500 a month right now to invest is not necessarily the point. The point is, as we can see, this is the value of compound interest, because how much did we actually invest out of our pocket? We invested this blue line or turquoise line down here. As you can see, those are your total contributions. So we'll go back to year 23. So we've invested $414,000 at this point in time. Sorry, I just want to make sure the look at the question, but we've invested $414,000. And then over the course of time, our money has grown to $1.25 million. Why? Because it's being invested, right? And so you're gaining maybe that 9% per year. And a way to kind of account for inflation, right? The US stock market tends to return about 11-ish% per year on average over the course of time. So what you can do is kind of subtract inflation from that and maybe use a 7 or an 8% number here. Obviously, inflation is a little bit high right now, but it's already starting to come down. I think it will start to normalize, within a year or two, get down hopefully to 4, 3, 2% eventually. But with this, what you can do is kind of give yourself an inflation adjusted return. And then that way you're able to account for that, right? So that's a good question from Michael. So let's get into, let's get in the second part. So real estate's a little bit different. Unfortunately, there's not this pretty formula like there is with stocks, right? And that formula is not necessarily perfect, right? What if you want to, retire for more than 30 years, right? So you might have to adjust the number. But I think what it does is it gives us a really great start of kind of looking at like, hey, what is that number? And then, again, we're just like, hey, investing $1,500 a month, right, into kind of index funds and different things like that, could get you there in 20 years less than maybe you were planning on, right? So very simplistic. It's not the whole story, but it gives us a great start of how to kind of plan. Real estate's a little bit different, right? It's more so coming down to, hey, if your expenses are $60,000 per year, that's $5,000 per month. So how many properties can you buy in order to develop that, $5,000, $6,000 per month in cash flow outside of your business expenses, so that you can also cover your personal expenses, right? And there's a lot of factors in that as well. But, one way of kind of just looking at it is like, hey, if I had 10 properties or 10 rental properties that were cash flowing $500 per month each, right? That would be $5,000. 10 per month. 10 properties may equal $4 million. But the thing you got to understand with real estate is that in some cases, you're only putting down 3 to 5%. Some cases, you're only putting down 20%, right? So even if they were all 20% down payments, that's $800,000 that you quote unquote invested over the course of time. But the other thing you got to take into account is that once you have your job and you've got maybe one rental property or two rental properties, there's money coming in from those rental properties that are helping you get to that, next rental property, right? So that's why usually the first one's the most difficult, but then the second one comes a little bit faster. The third one comes a little bit faster. The fourth one comes a little bit faster, right? Because you have your job plus one property, your job plus two, your job plus three, right? All going into that, whatever that next property is, right? So you can get there a lot faster. Now, how do you make money with real estate? You make money in 5 different ways. The first and arguably most important is cash flow, and that's monthly rent minus monthly expenses. We'll talk about what those are on the pages to follow. Appreciation plus leverage. I just want to make sure I wasn't skipping ahead. So appreciation is just the idea that, if you buy a house for $300,000 and then it goes up in value over the course of time to $400,000, right? That's $100,000 in appreciation. But the thing that you got to take into account, let's say that you have a $200,000 house, and let's say you put down $10,000, right? You put 5% down. Maybe it's a house hack, and if you don't know what that is, it's fine. But it's basically a property that you live in, so you're able to put less money down if you want to. In a lot of cases. So let's say that you put down $10,000, you bought a $200,000 home. Now, real estate typically appreciates about 3% per year on average. And you might be like, well, that kind of sucks because your stocks are, 8, 9, 10, 11%. But what you got to understand is that what goes up by 3%, the value of the home goes up by 3%, right? So you put in $10,000, the home is worth $200,000. So if that home goes up by 3% on average per year, right? That's $206,000 it would be worth after year one, which is a $6,000 gain. A $6,000 gain divided by the $10,000 that you put down on the house is a 60% return, right? So it's not really a 3% return. Why? Because of leverage. Leverage is the idea that the bank is putting down sometimes 80, sometimes 90, sometimes 95% of the, buying the house for you in the form of a mortgage. And yes, you got to pay it back. But the crazy thing is, if that house goes up by $100,000, the bank doesn't say, well, we own 80%, so we want 80% of the appreciation. Like if you sell it, the bank just wants their money back on the loan. And outside of that, all they want you to do is pay your monthly mortgage payment, because there's interest, obviously, that not interest, like money interest, that you pay on that monthly mortgage. But that's all coming from the tenant as well, from their rent that's going to pay that, right? So the third way is equity capture. Equity capture is the idea that in real estate, there's opportunities, where typically you can buy a property for less than it's worth, right? So maybe a property needs a lot of work. Somebody wants to get rid of it. They've held on to it for 40 years. There's not really too many cases or any cases in the stock market where if Amazon's worth $105 right now, I can't go, hey, buddy, I'll pay you $90 for it, right? They're like, no, it's worth $105. But a house is a unique asset that has a human that owns it, and they might have owned it for 30 years. Maybe they paid $150,000 for this house, right? And maybe now it's worth $400,000, but they can't sell it because it needs too much work, so people can't get a loan. So maybe you can be, go in as a rental property investor, and somebody might buy it all cash, right? And so they're like, well, I'm going to buy it all cash, but I want it at $350,000. And, maybe you're able to buy it for less than it's worth, right? So immediately when you put in that, the money maybe to fix it up, in this case, I'm just giving an example, right? That extra equity is already kind of built in because you bought it for less than it was worth to begin with, right? The fourth way is principal pay down. So this is the idea, like I said, a portion of your tenant's rent every single month goes to pay down the monthly mortgage. And so you're collecting the money, the property is going up in value over the course of time, and the loan that you owe is going down over the course of time. So that difference is your equity in the property, which is, goes directly into your net worth. The fifth way is tax advantages. So depreciation, cash out refis. There's a lot of different ways. I won't go into all of them, but just understand obviously that with real estate, there's a lot of different ways to, make money, and save on taxes as well. So let's look at just a basic example. Don't get too caught up in, well, there's not a property around me that's this cost, or I don't have that much money to put down. I just want you guys to understand the percentages and kind of how this works and how these different numbers come together, just so we can wrap our head around it, right? And this is honestly pretty close to the first property that I bought, 4 or 5 years ago, whenever it was. So home valued at 160, let's say you're able to buy it at 150. The money you put down, we'll say, is 20% down plus closing. The rent's $2,500. So we're going to say it's a triplex, which is just a 3-unit property. So it's maybe $800-ish per month. Let's say all your monthly expenses, which is your mortgage, your utilities, your maintenance, all that kind of stuff, is $1,500 per month. And so in this case, you'd be cash flowing about $1,000 per month after all those expenses. Now, after year one, if we look at your returns, that's $10,000 in equity capture because you bought it less than it was worth. Appreciation, $4,800 is 3% of 160. But again, if you remember, it's actually more than that in my opinion, because it went up by $4,800, but you only put in $34,000. So that's more like a 14% return just from appreciation alone. You also cash flowed $12,000 that year. The tenants paid down about $2,000 of that loan, which goes into your net worth. And then you also save probably about $1,100-ish on your taxes, just depending on what the rest of your tax situation looks like. So all the numbers on the left are the same from the previous page. So we're just going to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the numbers. So the total money that you spent was $34,000. Your total yearly return in year one is $29,869, which is just all these numbers on the left added up. Now, the two main returns you look at, one is cash on cash, which means how much cash flow am I getting per year divided by how much cash did I put into the deal, aka your down payment plus your closing costs. So in this case, $12,000 in cash flow divided by $34,000 is a 35% return cash on cash. And when you include kind of all these returns, right, like appreciation, of course, you can't go to the bank and necessarily, I mean, you could refinance or you could sell it, but it's still a part of your net worth, right? And it's still equity. Same thing with principal pay down and equity capture and all that. But in this case, if you add all those returns together, it's $30,000 divided by the $34,000 you put down, which is an 87% return, which sounds absolutely ridiculous. But the thing is, with real estate, the reason why you're able to get returns like this on particular properties, of course, this isn't every property, is because if you got the same returns in real estate that you did in the stock market, nobody would invest in real estate. Why? Because real estate's harder, right? That's like the blunt of it, right? It requires more work. You have to find properties. You have to get creative. You have to build a team, right? And it's not that it's too hard for anyone to do, right? I did it while I was working a full-time job and doing all these other things. But that is kind of the reason why people invest in real estate, is because it's more difficult. And because it's more difficult, there's a return to kind of, account for that. So let's look at the same deal and let's pan that out and say, okay, it's great in year one, but what's it going to look like over, 30 years? Because the house is going to keep going up by 3%. Rent's going to go up, but your mortgage payment's actually going to stay the same because you get a fixed rate mortgage, or you should. And that means your monthly mortgage payment is going to be the same for 30 years. But, obviously some things will go up, like your property taxes, insurance, et cetera. But your mortgage payment will stay the same over the course of time. So after year 5, from the rent continuing to go up, the property's appreciating, the tenants are paying down the loan, you're now making $15,000 a year in cash flow instead of $12,000. And you've also accumulated an extra $37,000 in your net worth from the property going up in value and the tenant paying down the loan. After year 15, you're now making $23,000 per year in cash flow, and you've accumulated an extra $132,000 in equity from appreciation and the tenant paying down the loan. And then after year 31, we pan it out because most mortgages are 30 years. In this case, you'd own a $400,000 house free and clear. You could sell it, or you could just keep collecting cash with no mortgage. And in that case, you're making $49,000 per year in cash flow. And you've accumulated an extra $368,000 just from the property going up in value and the tenant paying it down over the course of time. So I know that's a lot of numbers. I want to run it back just one more time just so we can kind of complete the loop here. So don't get hung up on the amount or, like the property's this, or I don't have that much to invest. There's other ways to get around that. But just roll with me for a second. So you invested, in this case, $34,000 one time. After the setup and purchase, you should have a property manager set up doing 99% of all the work, and you include that expense when you're running your numbers to make sure that it works. In 31 years, you own a $400,000 home paid in full that is paying you $50,000 a year in cash flow. And again, that's just one house. The goal is not just to buy one rental property, but imagine if you had 2 or 5 or 10, right? That would be $4 million in paid off real estate, paying you $500,000 per year. So the opportunities with real estate, if done correctly, can truly be immense. And that's why I added real estate into my own portfolio. And that's why I continue to buy deals. Now, the third option is reaching financial freedom through online business, right? That's a way that, or business in general, right? You can start a business, build up that revenue. So let's talk about that real quick. So the main goal, of course, is to replace your revenue from your job with a scalable business or online business so you can quit and focus on what you love and have time, work, and location freedom. So some people might say, well, real estate doesn't really sound for me. Stocks sounds like it might take too long. Or, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. I've already got a business idea. This is the thing that I want to do. And so this is what is going to be for me, right? And so when you build a business, right, that could happen in 6 months or 12 months or 3 years or 5 years, right? And I think a lot of times people think like, well, 5 years is a long time for a business. And I'm like, you've already committed to working 45 years at a job that maybe you don't like, right? So what's long? You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like you're living life anyways. So if it's something that you want to do, right, it's definitely worth doing. Of course, there's pros and cons and work that's involved and risk, et cetera. We all understand that, but it can be great for you if it's something you want to do. Excuse me. So some examples, I've got some friends, right? And these are mostly online businesses just because obviously that's kind of what I do as well. But Daniel, he doesn't teach or coach, but he works with brands. He has a finance channel, and so he makes finance videos. He builds up a following, and then what he does is monetizes that following by saying, hey, like, this bank or whatever company, do you want access to my audience? And then you're able to go out and find those. You're able to go out and, basically paid for advertising. Kat is somebody that sells Excel course modules online. I never thought, it makes sense. Excel is probably the most used program in the world. I just didn't think people cared enough about it to take a course on it, but she does really well and she's killing it. And she quit her job probably a year or two ago. Stephanie is another friend of mine. She has an account where she reviews cities and hotels. I don't know how she got into it. Probably should bring her on for a live or something. But now because she started blogging about it, it started kind of a travel blog and all that kind of stuff. She built up an audience, and people, cities or hotels or whatever, resorts may pay her or do pay her for her reviews and things like that. And so she gets to travel, go where she wants, but also make money and live that life, right? Another friend of mine, Haley, she sucked at being a realtor, right? And she'd be okay with me saying that. But the thing that she was good at was social media, right? So social media is a part of being a realtor nowadays. Like, you have to build up a social media presence unless you're somebody that's been in the game for a really long time and you've built up a clientele. 9 times out of 10, social media is a part of it, right? So what did she do? She was like, well, I'm not good at being a realtor, but I'm good at social media. So she created social media templates specifically for realtors, right? And so if you're a realtor and you're wanting social media help, right, you go to her because it's tailored exactly to you. And realtors are probably one of the most high quantity professions in the world, right? And so it's a huge market. She's got, I don't know what it is, maybe 4,000 people paying her $40 a month, which I don't know what that is, but it's either 16,000 or 160,000. I think it's 160,000 if I'm not mistaken, which is crazy, right? But for her, she built that up over the course of time. And again, these are just some examples of people, and obviously they probably worked for many years to do this. But how do you know when it's time to maybe quit? Well, what I would want to see is, let's say your expenses are $4,000 per month, like your personal expenses. and let's say your revenue from your business, or really maybe your profit from your business would be better to say, is $8,000 per month, right? And that way you've got a buffer there, because you don't want to be making 4,000 profit and you got 4,000 in personal expenses. I think you're cutting it too close. Obviously, if you have a bad month or something like that, you're putting yourself at risk. How many months? I'd probably want to see it for like 6 months in a row. That way you're able to kind of consistently, outperform your expenses. It's not like a 1 month thing, like you're doing it consistently. I'd probably also want to see that you have 6 months of expenses saved up in some sort of emergency fund. And then also you just want to make sure, like, hey, like, let's say I'm making 8,000 in profit per month and my expenses are 4,000 a month. My expenses might go up over the course of time, right? So is this something that is future proof, meaning like making sure you're not starting a newspaper company, right? That's obviously an extreme example, but just understanding like what industry you're in. Is it something that's going to continue to grow? And then your plan to scale, right? And so that's another thing as well, is like, you have a plan of kind of continue to grow it. So now the question is, which fits you best, right? And the main goal here is talking about the difference between, again, the red is kind of the cons and the green are kind of the pros. And you have to excuse my elementary level Canva design skills. As you can see, that's definitely a weakness for me, but it gets the point across. But here's your path, right? So we talked about stocks, real estate, business. And so when it comes to the time to retire, or let's talk about stocks, right? So the time to retire is probably going to be 25, maybe 30 years, right? Now, obviously, the more you invest, the quicker you're going to get there. We went over that a little bit earlier. We talked about compound interest. The good part is there's little to no time required. The financial investment, again, that doesn't mean starting off you need to invest $3,000 to $4,000 a month. But again, if you are wanting to maybe retire in 10, 15 years, it's probably going to require you to start investing upwards of that amount really as soon as possible. Now, if you're okay with, retiring in 25, 30 years, which you might be okay with, right? Obviously, it's going to be much less than that, but it's just about figuring out your number and where, and kind of what you need to do. Your likelihood of achieving it is extremely high. Why? Because it's really about just learning how to build a portfolio and just automating your investments, right? And then continuing to work your job or do whatever you do. And just over time, you wait it out, right? Real estate, you can get there typically a lot shorter. But again, the amount of time that's required, the amount of effort that's required, obviously is a bump up. It's not just automating investments. You can get a property manager and whatnot. So it's more so a lot of work on the front end. But once you have a property set up, a lot of times you can kind of narrow that down. Financial investment depends on the down payment. Again, so a little bit tough there, but probably a little bit more than, stocks. You could start off with $1 if you wanted to, right? Real estate probably going to take you a little bit more in most cases. And again, likelihood of achievement. I'm not going to say it's like not likely, but obviously the more work that's required in anything, it just means that it's a little bit less likely, right? Because it relies on you being able to consistently show up to do whatever's needed. Business is kind of the extreme example, right? So you can get there. I mean, I've seen people quit their jobs in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, right? So you can get there a lot sooner, because it's really just about how fast can you build up that revenue. Time required, though, is probably maximum, depending on what business it is. Like, obviously you can get creative with that, but typically it's going to require you to go all in. The good part about business or online business a lot of times is that there's not really a lot of risk involved when it comes to capital. Like a lot of times, like if you're starting an online business, it can be as easy as like building a website, right? And getting traffic to it somehow, which can be done at, obviously you can pay if you want to, but it can be done at little to no cost through social media and things like that. And then your likelihood of achievement. I wouldn't say it's unlikely, but being an entrepreneur is a real thing. It's not like this glamorous thing like everybody presents it to be. Obviously, it's got its pros and its cons, but it's the most work required, I would say, out of all of them, because typically it's going to require you to consistently be involved much more than these other two, right? So that's kind of how you figure out which one fits you. And that's the idea of financial independence, right? So we've got our income, we've got investing, getting that money working for us either in the stock market and or business and or real estate, right? And then letting those assets, right, whether passively or actively or a little bit of both, make money for us outside of our job, to where at the end, we're able to take out this W-2 or job or whatever that you have going on. And this system is still able to run itself without the income coming in, which is what financial freedom or financial independence is. So we're almost wrapping up. about to go in the Q&A. I want to hear from you guys. I know it's a lot of talking. Like I said, I want to get through it. That's why I wasn't stopping a much, but I want to hear from you guys. Have you guys gotten value? Did you find this valuable? I tried to go over again as much as I could jam into this time to make sure you guys got as much out of it as possible. But let me know in the chat, did you guys get value out of this? Did you find it valuable? Did you enjoy, the experience? Let me know in the chat. You can just throw whatever in there, or a thumbs up, a yes, or whatever. Just let me know. Shannon said absolutely. Marcella said very valuable. Maxwell said yes. Awesome. I'm glad you guys got a lot out of it. And I want you guys to know, did you see that retiring at 65 no longer seems normal? And how creating financial freedom in your life could only be a 5 to 10 year process or less. And by employing a few strategies, you could be saving more, investing more, and building serious wealth fast. And now, obviously, when you take action and stay consistent and do the right things, it's possible for people with no previous financial knowledge to get big results fast. And so some questions I'm sure a lot of you guys are probably, still have. Of course, we went over a high level overview, obviously, of everything as much as I could, but obviously we all understand there's a lot more to it. How do you build a spending plan or a budget to kind of get you to where you're trying to go? When should you pay off debt? When should you save? When should you invest? How much should you have in your emergency fund? How do you get out of a dead-end job or pick a career path that's not going to lead you down a dead end so that you can continue to make more money, so that you can continue to invest more, so that you can retire earlier? How do you maximize your benefits? How do you invest in, find properties and run the numbers and invest in long-term rentals, short-term rentals, Airbnb, things like that? How should I invest in the stock market to make the highest amount of money over the course of time while also taking less risk? And if I do invest in the stock market, should I be focused on a 401k, Roth IRA, taxable brokerage? And then what should I be doing? A lot of people talked about discipline. What should I be doing on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis in order to make sure that my system is mostly automatic, but I'm also throwing in some manual overview to make sure that I'm staying on track with my goals, right? And then if you want to start a business, how do you know what kind of business to start, and how do you build it and scale it into something that is going to take you to where you want to go? So there's really two ways, right, for you to kind of figure these things out and put it into action. Of course, this is the way that I took, and the long path. Unfortunately, I was like, oh, I'm just going to Google and YouTube everything and read all these books, and that's fine. But obviously, it kind of probably took me, ironically, even though it took me a short amount of time, it probably took me longer than it should have, because I was kind of trying to do the, just like the route of like kind of going the long way and figuring out everything through books and online. And I didn't really have anyone to go to. I ran into a lot of obstacles. I had a lot of time where I was stuck. And I basically had to learn the hard way through basically making mistakes and losing money along the way. And because I didn't have kind of an organized program or a mentor or anything like that. The other way is, if I could do it all over again, what would I do? First of all, I would get around a group of people, right? Friends or again, I hate this whole thing like, oh, you should like dump all your friends and get new friends. Like, if you like your friends, like hang out with your friends. I still hang out with my friends, but I've also added in friends that are doing this, right? Or that are on this journey as well. Get around people like that. Get around an organized curriculum. I think too many people jump around from all these different YouTube channels. And so people are saying conflicting things, and then they end up kind of jumping from idea to idea and all this different stuff. And they don't know where to go because they're getting too much information from too many different people. A mentor is, I think, the number one thing. Because you want to have somebody that's already gotten to where you've gotten to, and it's somebody that not just teaches you, but you can actually talk to and help guide you and build your own plan. And then access to other people, like I was saying, that have maybe taken different paths, or just more education around people that have gotten to where it is. So for all you guys, right before we go into the Q&A right after this, but I do want to take a second, because I'm sure a lot of you guys here, might be interested in taking that short path. So let me know if it's all right if I just take 2 or 3 minutes here. I just want to explain, what that short path is. Of course, I know a lot of you guys, might be interested in taking that path or working with me. And if you do, great. If you don't, great. That's fine. We're still going to go in the Q&A, but just let me know in the chat. Just let me know, throw a yes in there or a thumbs up. I'm sorry if I take 2 or 3 minutes and explain that real quick. And that way we'll kind of get that knocked out. But again, I know a lot of you guys are probably interested in that. So you guys have probably heard that maybe about my masterclass and kind of what we've done to help people. And the next one's coming up here in maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And the reason why I built this was really to fix all those things, because I think online courses and books are, I mean, I've taken a lot of courses and books, so I'm not going to say they're terrible, but they're terrible at doing what they're designed to do, right? They like, if I read a book for, I don't really love Dave Ramsey, but if it's Dave Ramsey, right, I can't talk to Dave Ramsey. If I run into an obstacle or I say, hey, well, Dave, how does that affect what's going on in my life? I can't talk to him. I have no system. I have no network. I have no group of people, right? And so I built this to basically say, if I had to do over what I did over the last 8 years, I have to do it over again. And I had to basically give someone the highest possible likelihood of achieving what I did. What would I build, right? And so that's really what I did. And so the curriculum in the course, as far as what we learn, it's 10 modules built out over 6 weeks, right? So we take one or two a week of modules. They're live, so you can either attend them live or they're also recorded, so you can watch them later if that's what you prefer. People do it either way, it's fine. You also get lifetime access to that as well. But what we go over is, somebody was talking about step 1, figuring out what you want, right? So the first lesson, we go over what is financial freedom and how do we even figure out where we want to go, who we are, where we're trying to get to, because that's the most important thing in figuring out how to get there, right? Second one is figuring out, like you guys were talking about earlier, as far as the metrics. What metrics do I need to track? What do I need to be doing on a monthly basis as far as cash flow, savings rate? How do I track these things and how do I improve upon them and build that plan to continue to grow them? We're going to talk about debt, credit, savings. How do you grow your income to 6 figures and beyond? How do you pick the right career path or change career paths and maximize your benefits? How do I get raises? How do you build massive cash flow and long-term generational wealth through either the stock market, real estate, or business? How do you build a portfolio? What accounts should you be investing in? What are the differences between all those accounts? How do you find the real estate deals? How do you run the numbers? How much money do you need? How do you get that money? How do you find that money? How do you get a property manager and get that set up and running so that you can invest passively in real estate if that's something you want to do? And then the last module, we talk about building an online business and how to scale basically a business from nothing up into over 6 figures, 6-7 figures a year, doing that as well, right? So that's what we learn. And so as far as like the takeaways, it's getting clarity on what you want. Most people immediately right off the bat save anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a month just from reworking their budget, right? So if you're somebody that doesn't have a budget or you're wondering where all your money's going, that part is massive, and it's honestly just a tiny part of it. How to make $100,000 per year from multiple income sources, how to take that extra cash flow and start building your financial freedom system. And again, savings, debt, credit, rewriting your resume, navigating the job market. We bring in CPAs, we bring in Airbnb investors, we go over stocks, 401k, IRA, et cetera, and then talking about building businesses as well. So who is this for? This is for really people at any level who want to reach financial freedom in 10 to 15 years or less. So we've got people that are in college, we've got people that are 40, we've got people everywhere in between. We've got people that make $50,000 a year. We've got people that are doctors making $300,000 a year. So really, it's just anybody that's really at the point where the pain of staying the same is getting greater than the pain of changing, right? And so somebody's like, I'm ready for that step. I'm ready to figure it out. I want direct mentorship from somebody that's done it, right? So that you can get to that to that point, right? And so the whole thing that I try to do is, how can I maximize the likelihood of achievement, right? And giving someone their dream outcome in the shortest amount of time. And so how did I do that? I told you guys there's live sessions. So not only do you get, a lot of people think, oh, well, I just take a course, I'm never going to hear from this guy again. You're going to hear from me so many times, you're going to want to never see my face again, right? That's the goal, because I think that's the most important part of a course, is having someone there with you so that when you get stuck, you can stop it right there, right? You can get over the obstacle right there because you can go ask somebody. So you'll be talking to me live 3-4 nights a week if you want to be there. And if you don't show up live, you want to watch the recordings, there's other opportunities to contact me throughout the entire experience. You also get lifetime access to all the modules. So obviously some of these things might come up. It's good to learn them now, but they might take more effect later in your life. So you have the opportunity to go over that. We do group office hours. So every single week for 2 hours, I have no curriculum. I come on here and I just sit here and I wait for people to come in and they ask me their questions directly. And it's almost like a one-on-one I'll sit there. If there's only one person, I'll sit there and talk to you for 2 hours, right? If there's 3 or 4 people, we'll basically just go like one by one, asking your questions about your situation, your life, things we went over in class, whatever, but it's your time to talk to me directly with no curriculum, no nothing, right? Lifetime access to a private Facebook group where we're going to be talking in there throughout the entire time. I'm going to be giving you daily updates. So it's not going to be something where you're like, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to join and then I'm not going to actually take the classes. Like I'm going to be emailing out everybody every day, right? And saying, hey, this is what's going on. This is what we went over. Here's the homework, right? And people will be doing it at their own pace somewhat, right? But I like to have that accountability because there's going to be some nights where you're like, well, we're 2 weeks in and I kind of just want to sit down. I'm like, no, give me 5 weeks, and let me change your life. Show up tonight. Let's do this. Right. So sometimes we need that, right? I know I do. We're going to be doing private lives. So we're going to have somebody that's an HR specialist come on, look at everybody's resume. If you want your LinkedIn, how to navigate the job market, how to network, how to deal with recruiting companies, and how to get the absolute highest jobs, paying jobs possible. We're going to bring on an Airbnb investor that does $500,000 a year. We're going to bring on a CPA to show us how to plan for taxes and save on our taxes, and just bringing in people like that to kind of just further your learning. So a lot of you guys might be wondering, like, how does this, how's this set up? And again, all these are recorded, they're all recorded live, so you can join if it's something you want, but you can also just watch the recordings as well, right? So the first module, again, is what is financial freedom, figuring out what we want, figuring out where you are now, right? And I work in some open days here to kind of give you time to catch up. And then also we do office hours every week, right? So that first week, there's going to be 3 modules because I really want to get off to a good start. And then the next week, we're going to have, module 4, we're going to have a special guest navigating the job market. And then we're going to go into debt, credit, and savings, and then the stock market, right? So, and then guest speaker about CPA, about taxes and whatnot, and then understanding the stock market part 2. So the first one is how to build a portfolio and then where to put that money and what accounts. And as you can see, every single week you're getting office hours with me. You're getting opportunities for guest speakers, and you get to come in live and also ask them questions as well. And then you also get the opportunity to in that final week, we're talking about investing in real estate, building a side hustle, office hours, all that kind of stuff as well. So what is the total value? I mean, the total value is really hard because there's people that genuinely come in and get $5,000, $10,000 raises, or buy their first rental properties, or they figure out how to save $5,000 a year just from budgeting, or some combination of all those things, right? So as you can see right here, like this woman said, her and her husband took it together and they said, hey, I feel like this course fast forwarded my timeline by decades. I'm already going for a promotion that I wouldn't have. And Sean's job search is now twice his salary. So he was making like $35,000 or $40,000, actually lost his job in the middle of the masterclass. And by the end of it, from really the section on raising your income, resumes, LinkedIn, networking, he got a job that was $80,000 a year. So I would say the total value is that I'm very comfortable with is it's probably worth way more than $5,000, but that's really what I would say. So is it worth $5,000? I don't know. Like I said, these are some real examples of people that have taken it. So Fuad he was somebody that was already in a good field, right? But we reworked his resume, got him back on the job market, pushed him to kind of do that. He's getting job offers, $30,000, $40,000 a year more. Crystal was the woman we talked about on the last slide. She got a $15,000 raise. Her husband got a $30,000, $40,000 raise. But there's also, it's not just about raises, right? Some of it's about budgeting. Some of it, like Michael's, about increasing his cash flow through a new rental property. Valerie had doubled her savings rate, right? And she got $1,000 going into her emergency fund, and now she's got investments that are working for her, right? So she's starting off, and there's people at all levels. This is probably my favorite one, even though there's no numbers involved. But Jalen said she's somebody that's taken a bachelor's in finance and a master's in finance. So she's gone to school for like 7 years for finance. And she said, what is this course's value in dollars? It's invaluable. Why? Because it's all the information and tools you need to be successful in personal finance bundled up into a 5-week masterclass. The Bachelor of Business and the Master's of Finance degrees, I learned, cost a lot more, which probably cost her $60,000, $70,000 for all that, and didn't even teach the details and actionable content in Tyler's course, right? So this is Crystal and C we already talked about, so I won't dive into that, but they found $5,000 a year in their budget. They also got $50,000 in raises. Just that alone invested over the course of time. Because again, it's not just about budgeting. It's not just about raising your income. We talk about, all right, let's do both of those. And now let's take that extra money and then let's get it working for you to where now that money is making you money. And so we can compound these little differences and turn them into big differences and then turn them into bigger differences, right? So they went from retiring probably in 45 years to now probably being on track to retire in 20 years, 15 years. So what is the price? Well, the value again is $5,000, but the price is actually only $497 because I don't want there's people that do things like this where they don't coach you, they don't teach you, they don't give you access to talk to them, they don't give you email access, they don't give you office hours access, and they definitely don't do live classes. And the price is usually $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, and I'm sure you've probably seen them online. But for me personally, I don't want that to be the reason why you don't get in, right? And for you guys here tonight, I told you guys I had some special surprises for you guys as well. Tonight is only $397 for the May masterclass that's upcoming. That's a special deal for you guys that are here tonight. I told you guys for sticking around, plus a couple more bonuses. Also, if you guys stick around tonight and join tonight, the 6-hour real estate course that I have that teaches you how to find money, how to pick your strategy, how to find deals, how to run the numbers, how to build a team, how to make offers on properties, and how to find a property manager to run it for you. That 6-7-hour real estate course will come with that $397 at no extra cost for you guys. And then I also got one more, and this one's big. I've never actually done this before, but I'm going to be trying it out with you guys. And I'm probably only going to be doing like 10 of these. So the first 10 or so of you guys to join tonight, we'll have this because I'm not sure if I'll have enough time to do it. But since we have 2 or 3 weeks before the class starts, I'm going to be offering one-on-one personal strategy video sessions for half hours with each one of you guys that join before we start. That way we get to talk, we get to know each other. I get to learn about your situation, right? And I can kind of highlight, hey, you should take the whole course, but I really want you to focus on these parts. These are some things I think you can start doing now. These are my opinion on what's going on in your life. And we get an intimate one-on-one session that you can bring your husband or your wife or whomever that might be involved in these decisions, and we get to talk. And I've never done anything like that ever before. And then I'm also going to be offering 1 or 2 office hours, which will be kind of a 2 hours open. Any of you guys that join can come in, and that will also be before. So I'm going to give you guys opportunities to whoever joins tonight to be able to have those sessions with me one-on-one, and then also in small group before the class starts to make sure that you get the most out of it. So as a thank you, as I said, for being here, I'm giving you guys $100 off my real estate course for free, plus those 2 personal strategy sessions, one with me personally, one-on-one, which I can give you the details of booking on my calendar, and it will be free of charge for you guys that join. And then also some people ask payment plans, right? So you can do 4 months at $99 a piece, 2 months, which is $198 a piece, or just one payment, knock it out at $397. And the biggest thing is I give you guys a 100% money back guarantee. I don't think there's really any other course that does that. Why? Because, people are, of course, people that sell courses are bad people or this or that. And the truth is a lot of them are, right? And that's why there's a problem. And I have to fight that every day, right? Because if there's a good person in a spot with bad people, right, doesn't mean it's a bad person. And so I'm like, how do I separate myself? Well, this is how I separate myself. This is how confident I am in the offer, because I've taken 1,000 people have taken this masterclass and 0 people have asked for their money back, but I still offer a 100%, no questions asked, don't care why. If you say, hey, for any reason whatsoever, I don't feel like I got the value of what I paid or 5 times more than that, I'll send you your money back right now. Because there's people that maybe they're from we've had people from Europe, South America, Central America, Asia that have taken it. And for those people, like if for whatever reason they get in, they're like, well, this is a really great class. I see what you did here. I got a lot out of it. But because of where I live, I don't want there to be any reason why someone feels like they got more value than they got than what they paid, right? Or why they didn't get at least as much value as what they paid, right? So I offer 100% money back guarantee for really any reason whatsoever, and that as well, right? So obviously at this point, before we jump into Q&A, you guys got 2 options, of course, and I love you either way, but I just like to frame it because some of you guys maybe are sitting on the fence, and some of you guys, I know somebody in here was saying like, hey, I've been kind of, Joe said he's been learning for 22 years and he's still stuck, right? So Joe, whether you join or not, still love you. I think you figure it out, but this is the way I kind of look at it, right? You have 2 options. One, you can decide to wait until next year, or when the timing is perfect, or when the baby's grown up, or when you get out of college, or you get the degree or the promotion or whatever, these things that we kind of put in as the perfect moment that never really comes. But you'll save $300, $400, but you're going to obviously end up sacrificing time, which is your most valuable asset that you own, hundreds of hours and probably thousands of dollars over time, figuring it out the long way, kind of like I did, because you're going to read 100 books, $20 a book, right? That's thousands of dollars, right? And it's going to take you a lot longer, and it's not going to get you what you need in the shortest amount of time. Or you can make the opportunity to invest in yourself and start moving towards your dream life today. And imagine, again, this is 1 month, right? So it's 5 weeks or so. By the end of May, you're going to be able to know 100% of everything that you need to know in order to reach financial freedom. And if for whatever reason you get to the point where you don't feel like you got way more value than what you paid, the worst case scenario is that you get your money back. So in this case, the real worst case scenario, I think, is the lost time and the risk of not joining, right? So if you're ready to take control, throw a freedom in the chat. I'll go ahead and put the link in there for you guys to go to the page, and I'll show you guys real quick. And I would love to have you guys in there. And if you guys have any questions about it, definitely feel free to throw it in there. I just put that in the chat. If you guys could click that and let me know that you that it works for you. Just sometimes Zoom's weird, but what you can do if you're ready to go, there's more information about it. And if you want to learn more about it, I'd love for you to do that. And if you have any questions about it, you can ask them now, or you can message me on Instagram or wherever, and I will be more than happy to talk through it with you if you have any sort of questions about whether or not it'd be right for you. And so who's it for, who's it not for, all this stuff. If you're in, you can look at all the testimonials of people that, I've got hundreds of these things, right? Of people that have taken the course, all 5 stars, all saying, hey, this is crazy what it's been able to do for me. So if you guys are ready to do that, you can just click on enroll. You can scroll down here and click on, which one that you want, right? So obviously the webinar bonuses are for tonight, which is the one-on-one strategy session, which I've never offered before, the office hours, and then also the real estate property course as well, in addition to all the different stuff as far as the 10 modules, the guest speakers, the opportunity to email me and Facebook me and ask questions over the course of the entire time, the lifetime access to the group, the lifetime access to all the course modules, and all that kind of stuff as well, right? So if you guys have any questions, definitely let me know. Shannon, awesome. Thanks for letting me know that it works. Excuse me. And I did obviously offer you guys some extra free gifts as well, as if I haven't already gave out a ton of free information already. DM me the word ebook on Instagram if you want to write that down, and DM me the word calculator. Ebook, I'll send you a link to my unreleased ebook, which is basically a 15-20 page ebook, kind of on some of the stuff we went over tonight, but a little bit more detail, stuff like that. It's a great read. Take you maybe an hour or two to read it, maybe less, but I think it's really great. And then DM me the word calculator on Instagram as well, and I'll send you my rental property deal calculator. And I would love for you guys to get started with those free gifts as well. So I'll go on the Q&A. This can be about the course. This can be about anything we went over tonight, any questions you got going on about your life, or whatever the case may be. But again, tonight, 100% money back guarantee. You can break it up into payment plans. I put the link in there